On November 3, 2016, police officers searching a 95-acre property near Woodruff, South Carolina, were startled when they heard banging coming from inside a large metal storage container. Prying open the unit, they discovered a young woman shackled at the ankles and hands with a chain around her neck. As they freed her from her binds, she told them that her captor was Todd Kohlhepp and he'd killed her boyfriend along with several others. As law enforcement listened to her story, they began opening a case against the 45-year-old she'd accused of abducting her. But who exactly was Todd Kohlhepp? In this episode of Murderous Minds, we aim to shed light on the answer to this question, as well as many others, as we explore the life and crimes of Todd Kohlhepp. Todd Christopher Samsel was born March 7, 1971 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to Regina Torg and a military veteran named William Samsel. The couple had been together for 4 years, but divorced when Kohlhepp was just 2. Raised in both South Carolina and Georgia, Regina gained full custody of her son and remarried about a year and a half after her split from his father. Kohlhepp took on his stepfather's surname when he was about 5 years old, after Carl Kohlhepp adopted him. He had 2 step-siblings. Reportedly during his childhood, Kohlhepp was physically abused by his grandfather, who beat and shocked him, and his mother with a cattle prod. And according to Regina, his problems started when he was as young as 15 months old.
By the time I was 5, Grandpa thought it was fun to shock me or my mother with a cattle prod. And he'll just walk up to you, put the probes on you, hit the button. It's not fun. It's definitely not for humans. I have no love for my family.
In school, Kohlhepp was described as a bully. His academic performance was poor, but he showed no sign of any major behavioral issues. The only trouble he got into as a child was buying a piece of stolen property. He was, however, known by his peers and family members to carry a lot of rage that was often directed at his stepfather, but later would be aimed at his biological father. His father would later tell the media, "The only emotion Todd is capable of is anger." In nursery school, Kohlhepp was known to be aggressive. He would hit other children and destroy their property and projects. By the age of 9, he had begun to undergo counselling, where he was described as being explosive and preoccupied with sexual content. Throughout his childhood, he also exhibited severely troublesome behaviour, such as cruelty to animals. He once killed a goldfish by adding Clorox bleach to its tank and shot a dog with a BB gun. He was also kicked out of the Boy Scouts for his disruptive behaviours and would later spend 3.5 months in a Georgia psychiatric hospital as an inpatient due to his inability to get along with other children. In the summer of 1983, when Kohlhepp was 12 years old, he was sent to live with his biological father in Arizona, whom he hadn't seen for around 8 years. During this time, Regina and Carl separated as they were suffering from marital issues, and the following school year, Kohlhepp was allowed to remain in Arizona with his father. He began using the surname Samsel again, and for a brief period of time, things seemed to be looking up. He began working odd jobs in the local community, doing some landscaping and working at a nearby Burger King. His father also employed him at his restaurant, Billy's Famous for Ribs, as a dishwasher and busboy. As for the relationship between Kohlhepp and his father, it appeared they got on well. William, who claimed to be a Special Forces soldier, mercenary and arms dealer, began sharing his love of weapons with his son, although Kohlhepp was also interested in the military and planes. After this, Kohlhepp began collecting guns himself. His father reportedly taught him how to blow things up and make bombs. However, it wasn't long before the pair's relationship began to disintegrate again, when William began to spend more and more time away from home. His absence in his son's life was noticeable, as he prioritized spending time with various girlfriends. At this time, Kohlhepp wished to return home to his mother, but she made excuses to extend his stay. Regina later stated that she felt her son wanted her all to himself, and that he did things to attempt to ruin her marriage. It seems that during this period of time, the anger that Kohlhepp had always directed at his stepfather was now focused on William, who later claimed that he tried to steer his son in the right direction.
There was not one night that I spent away from the house. Todd made up a lot of things.
Me and him did not bond. We didn't do models with each other. He was doing what he wanted to do, and I was just happened to be there along for the ride.
On November 25th, 1986, Kohlhepp, now 15, walked over to the home of a 14-year-old girl who lived 3 doors down from him. He lured her out of her house by claiming that her boyfriend wished to speak with her. The young girl agreed to go with him, and when she stepped out next to him, Kohlhepp put a .22 caliber revolver to her head. He led her back to his own home, where he tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and raped her. His father, William, was on a business trip in Nebraska at the time of the incident. After the crime, Kohlhepp walked his victim home and claimed that he'd kill her younger siblings if she told anyone about what had happened. It's unclear whether somebody had witnessed Kohlhepp with a gun, or if the unidentified 14-year-old herself reported the incident to the police. But either way, law enforcement quickly became alerted to the situation. The police arrived at Kohlhepp's home to find him with a rifle pointed at the ceiling. His first question to the officers was, "How much time am I going to get for this?" When he was asked why he did it, he responded by saying it was an act of rebellion towards his father. He also said he committed the crime out of anger.
I'm sorry. She deserved better. I had a lot of problems back then. I was young. I was foolish. I was 15 years old. I thought I was in love and I had no clue what in the world I was doing and acting out. I entirely was inappropriate. I'm sorry for what I did.
Kohlhepp was charged with kidnap, sexual assault, and committing a dangerous crime against children. In 1987, he pled guilty to kidnap, but the other charges against him were dropped. One of his probation officers would later go on to describe this move as a travesty of justice. His court records showed that he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder around this time, and he had an above-average IQ of 118. The judge on the case said he was very bright and should be advanced academically, but noted that he was behaviorally and emotionally dangerous. The judge also doubted that the 15-year-old could be rehabilitated. Additionally, Kohlhepp's probation officer wrote that the teenager felt the world owed him something. Meanwhile, his defense attorney stated that he did not believe his client would go on to harm others in the future. Despite the words of his lawyer, Kohlhepp was deemed to be too dangerous to be sent simply to juvenile detention, with his probation officer stating, "It is highly unlikely that a problem that has existed since he was approximately 15 months of age can be cured in less than 3 years treatment." As a result, he was sentenced to 15 years in an adult prison, and his name was put on the sex offenders register. His mother, Regina, seemed to make conflicting statements about his son's guilt. She stated that he was misunderstood, and that, as a court reporter, of all the cases she'd seen, she said, "Never have I seen this happen to a 15-year-old child, and not even any help offered. They don't stop to think that if you walk the girl home, does that sound like a dangerous criminal? He even walked the girl home." However, Regina also claimed that her son had absolutely no remorse regarding the offence. While in jail awaiting his hearing, Kohlhepp wrote several letters to his mother expressing regret for his actions, but Regina told probation officers that she didn't believe him, and felt he was saying these things in the hopes that he'd get a lenient sentence and could return to normal life. Reportedly, while he was in jail, neither of Kohlhepp's parents nor his stepfather wished to claim responsibility for him. Prison employees noticed that he lacked a strong support system. Still, Regina went on to plead for leniency for her son. She claimed he'd put his father on a pedestal and took everything he said as absolute truth. She blamed William for Kohlhepp's crimes, stating that a lack of a father in his life was the real issue. Regina and her son became closer at this time, and they shared letters back and forth. Following the crime, a neighbour described Kohlhepp as someone starved for affection and attention, but also called him a devil on a chain. Additionally, a psychiatrist who spoke with him while he was incarcerated called him deeply emotionally disturbed and said that he displayed signs of ego inflation and extreme rebellion against authority, as he generally feels he should be in control. 2 months after he was admitted to prison, Kohlhepp was cited for disobeying an order. This was just the first in a string of violations in his first year, which included fighting, destroying property, and striking a person. However, from the age of 20, he appeared to settle down and had no further incidents while behind bars. In August of 2001, Kohlhepp, now aged 30, was released from prison. He had served 14 out of his 15 years. By this time, his mother and stepfather had divorced, and Regina was living in South Carolina. Upon his release, Kohlhepp moved there too and began looking for work. While in prison, Kohlhepp had graduated from Central Arizona College with a bachelor's degree in computer science. He had also been part of Arizona Correctional Industries, a prison program designed to give vocational training to inmates while they created products for sale. As such, he had knowledge in product design and graphic design, and used this to his advantage. Beginning in January of 2002, Kohlhepp began working for a small sports apparel company based in Spartanburg named Seven Sons & Co. In 2003, he began studying at Greenville Technical College, before transferring to the University of South Carolina, upstate, the following year. In 2003, he graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Administration and Marketing. It was November of 2003 when Kohlhepp quit his job with Seven Sons & Co. And while at first this may seem like an ordinary move, that perhaps Kohlhepp was moving on to bigger and better things, the reason seems to become more clear when we take a look at a specific event during that month. On the morning of November 6th, a friend of 30-year-old Scott Ponder, the owner of a store named Superbike Motorsports, in the city of Chesney, discovered the bodies of Scott and 3 of his employees. All 4 had died from gunshot wounds. Local law enforcement was quickly sent to the scene, where they theorized that the perpetrator, armed with a pistol, entered the shop from the back and killed 26-year-old mechanic Chris Sherbert as he worked. Afterwards, they murdered 52-year-old Beverly Guy, the store's bookkeeper, and Scott Ponder's mother in the middle of the showroom, before finally killing the 29-year-old service manager Brian Lucas at the front door, and Scott, who was in the parking lot. The murders, which were dubbed the Superbike Killings, went unsolved for over a decade. It wasn't until Kohlhepp was arrested on other charges in 2016 that he confessed to the slaying of all 4 victims. Scott's wife stated that Kohlhepp had been a disgruntled customer who come to the shop on several occasions. Meanwhile, Regina Tague claimed that her son had attempted to return a motorcycle but was laughed at by employees who embarrassed him for not knowing how to ride the vehicle and refused to give him a refund. After Kohlhepp committed these murders and subsequently left his job with Seven Sons & Co., he decided to change his career path and applied to get a real estate license in June of 2006. Despite being a registered sex offender, he was able to obtain the license, and from this he built his own firm that employed at least 10 people. He was recognized as a top-selling agent in the Carolina region. To explain away his charge of kidnapping, Kohlhepp claimed that this had come as a result of a breakup he'd had with his girlfriend following a heated argument. He said that the two decided to remain friends afterwards, and she helped him look for his dog, which had escaped from his back garden. While the pair searched, his ex-girlfriend's parents became concerned as they couldn't reach her. As a result, they called the local police department. Kohlhepp also claimed that he was only carrying a gun at the time for protection, as there were criminal gangs in the area, and he added that he told her not to move while we talked this out. Although this story seems unbelievable, he was able to use it to make his criminal conviction seem insignificant and make it appear as if it was one big misunderstanding. After he successfully got his real estate license, he also acquired a private pilot license and bought up several properties, which he then went on to rent out. In June of 2007, he bought his own house in Winsong Way in the area of Moore in Spartanburg County for around $137,000. The home had been sold on foreclosure previously for around $80,000. From this house, Kohlhepp ran his business, which was very successful. Mortgage lenders on the networking app LinkedIn noted that he was an effective communicator and a pleasure to talk to, and on it when it comes to getting a deal done for his clients. A builder stated he was incredibly personable. Meanwhile, some of Kohlhepp's clients described him as domineering and arrogant, stating that he enjoyed bragging about his flash cars and shooting skills. An assistant pastor named Michael Foster, who rented a property that Kohlhepp managed, stated he was a creepy dude, adding he was just someone who makes everything about himself, someone that just talks a lot about money, and a lot about how many people work for him. I always sensed when I was around him that I needed to stay close to him. He was someone that you needed to manage his presence around you, so you don't get managed. Another customer who had sold her home to him recalled he was outgoing and professional for the most part, but often talked about weapons and slipped sexual innuendo into conversation. A separate woman who had assisted one of his employees described him as angry and condescending towards her partner, while a banker who'd worked with him alleged that Kohlhepp consumed pornographic content, in particular video content, even while he was at work. In his spare time, Kohlhepp frequented a Waffle House restaurant in Roebuck, where waitresses found his behaviour so disturbing that they asked the male chef to take his order for them. It's unclear what kind of behaviour he participated in that was so upsetting, but it's known that this is where he met one of his later victims, a young married woman named Megan Lee McCraw-Coxey, who was one of the restaurant's employees. Over the next few years, Kohlhepp flew largely under the radar. He seemed for the most part like a businessman who was concentrating on doing his own thing. In May of 2014, he purchased a 95-acre property in Woodruff, about 9 miles from the community of Moore, for about $305,000. After the purchase, he had a chain-link fence installed around the property, which cost him a further $80,000. Neighbours thought this was odd, but didn't think too much of it. Here, Kohlhepp mainly kept to himself, but he hired one man, a neighbour, to maintain the property. This man noticed that there was a large metal storage container on the land, which was filled with canned goods and bottled water. He later told the media that while he put up no trespassing signs and cut down trees, Kohlhepp set up deer cameras and bear traps throughout the area. Around this time, an Amazon account associated with the name Todd Kohlhepp showed purchases of all sorts of items, including padlocks, tactical gear, targets, knives, gun accessories, and books about snipers and emergency war surgery. Furthermore, the user began leaving reviews that were simply signed "Me." The language and style used in the reviews were reminiscent of that which was used in Kohlhepp's Facebook posts. The following are just some of the reviews that the account left. Many of them left other users disturbed. The reviewer also purchased items such as perfume, plush toys, and the Walking Dead box set. Notably, Kohlhepp stated that a character from the show, portrayed by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and known as Negan, would be a good writing candidate for president. Negan is known as a murderous dictator who uses a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire as his weapon of choice. In reference to this statement, he noted, "Just admit it. You look at the news, you see the political crap and the school shootings. Zombie apocalypse is starting to look better and better every day." Kohlhepp's Facebook posts are equally unnerving, discussing his frustration with drivers on rural roads who were sucking up the yellow line. He stated, "I am not the one you want to play chicken with, I will hit you." Furthermore, during the Charlotte's riot of 2016, he claimed that in his family, a disruptive child would get a spanking that was epic, and asked what the punishment would have been had he looted, burned cop cars, and threw stuff at people. In August of 2015, he posted that he wanted an Ebola virus snowstorm to hit the world of humans. He whined about drivers who cut him off, as well as people who stood in the supermarket and blocked the aisle, checking out the microbrews and blocking everyone on their way to their average Michelob Ultras. On August 29, 2016, the mother of 32-year-old Charles David Carver received a one-word text from her son. It was the last time she heard from him. Charles had gone with his girlfriend, 30-year-old Carla Brown, to do some work for a man who had a property in Woodruff, but neither of them had returned. The following day, a friend of Carla's, Leah Miller, spoke with her by phone. Carla reported that she was in Greenville and was on her way home. The next day, Leah received a text message from Carla asking if she was awake at 6:06 a.m. A few hours later, Leah replied but received no further communication from her friend. On September 3rd, 6 days after Charles was last heard from, his mother filed a missing persons report. She noted that she was also unable to reach Carla. A further 2 days passed before Leah reported her friend missing, noting that Carla's car, a black Chevy Cobalt, was in the car park of her apartment complex. Furthermore, the manager of Charles's apartment noticed that it had appeared empty for several days. Officers who checked out Carla's flat found her dog, who hadn't been fed for days. At some time between September and October, a post appeared on Charles's Facebook. He claimed that they were fine and were now married, but friends and family expressed that they didn't believe the post. It would later be revealed that Kohlhepp had taken over the account to throw off investigators. He hoped that law enforcement was satisfied by the post so that they wouldn't prod into the case any further, but detectives were not convinced by it either. Tracing the couple's phone signals in November, law enforcement was led to Kohlhepp's 95-acre property outside of Moore on 3rd. Inside the storage container, they discovered Carla Brown. She had been chained up like a dog for 2 months, her ankles and hands shackled, and a chain around her neck. She had been banging on the container when police arrived on the scene. She explained that from time to time she cleaned and cleared out properties that Kohlhepp planned to rent out. When asked what had happened to her boyfriend, Carla told the police that he had been shot upon their arrival. She noted that she had been repeatedly raped since being captured, and had been fed only once a day. 2 days after Carla's rescue, on November the 5th, Charles's body was found. He had died from multiple gunshot wounds. The property was searched in the days following, and investigators discovered Charles's vehicle in a ravine and covered in brush. Regina Tague would later claim that her son shot Charles because he got nasty and got smart-mouthed. Disturbingly, his remains were discovered without feet. This fact, combined with a comment Kohlhepp made about his mother telling him not to play with his food, has led to some speculation that he also had cannibalistic tendencies. Although, in the Devil Unchained documentary, he denied that he caused the feet to part from the body. Between November 6th and November 7th, 2 further bodies were unearthed, and during questioning, Kohlhepp claimed responsibility for the infamous Superbike killings, a case that had remained cold and unsolved since 2003. On November 8th, the 2 bodies discovered on the property were identified as belonging to Johnny Joe Coxey, who was 29 at the time of his death, and his wife Megan, a 26-year-old waitress who had worked at Kohlhepp's favourite Waffle House restaurant. The 2 were residents of Spartanburg and had been missing since December 22, 2015. The couple were allegedly hired by Kohlhepp to carry out work on his property, but instead they were met with death. Megan had been killed around Christmas of 2015 after she'd been shot in the head, while her husband Johnny had been murdered around 1 week earlier. He'd been inflicted with a gunshot wound to the torso. Their identification was made easier by the extensive tattoos the couple had. Kohlhepp later said that Johnny had pulled a knife on him and he shot him before putting Megan in the same container Carla was later found in. he later shot her there. As for Kohlhepp himself, he was arrested shortly after Carla had been rescued. In custody, as we mentioned earlier, he confessed to the superbike killings, although Carla was the first to alert authorities to this because he had bragged about it, and the slayings of both Megan and Johnny. In exchange for his admittance, he was allowed to talk with his mother, give her a photo, and transfer money in his bank account to the college fund of a friend's child. Reportedly, while meeting with Regina, he confessed to everything and told her he'd shot each superbike victim once in the forehead. Regina claimed that her son simply didn't know what to do after killing Charles, stating he didn't know what to do with Carla. He couldn't turn her loose. She'd go get the police. For his part, Kohlhepp claimed she didn't do anything wrong and he didn't want to hurt her, although Carla argued that he told her he'd shot Charles because he was mad at her. She added that he'd shown her the graves of 2 other victims in order to intimidate her into not attempting an escape. A search of Kohlhepp's home turned up numerous weapons, including 9mm pistols with suppressors, semi-automatic rifles, and an abundance of ammunition. As there was no record that a background check had been performed under his name, it was deemed likely that he had acquired all of the weapons illegally. At this point, investigators with Spartanburg County discovered the Amazon reviews that had been left by the user going by Me, whose account was associated with Kohlhepp. Speaking with 48 Hours, Sheriff Wright commented that the 45-year-old during this time was very polite and real remorseful actually. Reportedly, Kohlhepp told his mother that there were many other victims. When asked how many, he told her, "You do not have enough fingers." During his interrogation, he told law enforcement that he'd shot another victim while in Arizona. On November 18, 2016, it was reported that the police in Tempe, Arizona, the city in which Kohlhepp had resided while staying with his father as a teenager, had begun an investigation into his claim. They looked for unsolved homicides that had occurred in the past 30 years, and stated they'd focus specifically on the years between 1983 and 1986, and between August of 2001 and November of 2011, which was shortly after he completed his jail sentence. Later that month, on November 25th, authorities in Greer, South Carolina, announced that they'd named Kohlhepp as a person of interest in an unsolved 2003 bank robbery and triple homicide at a local bank. The crime had occurred around 6 months after the superbike killings. However, as of 2018, no concrete link has been established between Kohlhepp and the attack. The now 51-year-old has denied any involvement in the case. In December of 2017, Kohlhepp wrote to the Spartanburg Herald-Journal claiming that he had more undiscovered victims. He wrote, "Yes, there is more than 7. I tried to tell investigators, and I did tell the FBI, but I was blown off. It's not an additional problem, it's a multiplication problem. Leaves the state and leaves the country. Thank you, private pilot's license. At this point, I really don't see reason to give numbers or locations." He later claimed that in 2003, while living at Hunt Club Apartments in Spartanburg County, residents had discovered that he was a registered sex offender and began repeatedly harassing him. He alleged that the police had told him to deal with it and stated 2 individuals decided to assault me and they are no longer with us. Kohlhepp said one had a knife and one had a hammer, and so he felt he had no choice but to kill them. He stabbed one individual in the chest, the other in the back, and dumped their bodies at a dead-end road of Interstate 26 between Spartanburg and Columbia. A documentary named Serial Killer, Devil Unchained follows investigators as they search for the bodies, but they come away empty-handed. During this documentary, Kohlhepp also told investigative journalist Maria Ors that there are considerably more than 7 victims. Initially, Kohlhepp was charged with 4 counts of murder in relation to the superbike killings and 1 count of kidnapping in relation to Carla's abduction. However, he was later charged with 3 additional counts of murder for the slayings of Charles Carver and Megan and Johnny Coxey, plus 1 further count of kidnapping and 3 counts of possession of a deadly weapon, during the commission of a violent crime. Kohlhepp ultimately pled guilty to 7 counts of murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of first-degree criminal sexual assault. In 2017, he was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 60 years. Pleading guilty was part of a plea bargain that allowed him to avoid the death penalty. In August of 2018, Carla Brown was awarded $6 million from Kohlhepp's estate after she'd filed a lawsuit against him for damages. A psychiatrist testified on her behalf that she'd need therapy and medication for years to come to cope with the trauma she experienced after being locked up and assaulted for 65 days in 2016. A friend of Carla's noted that she wanted to one day work as a victim's advocate. In the years since, Carla has lost a boyfriend to suicide and was charged, along with a new boyfriend, with third-degree criminal domestic violence. This charge occurred after the pair had engaged in an altercation. However, since then, she appears to be doing better. She was referenced in an Eminem song named The Ringer, where he says, "I'm off the chain like Carla Brown," which attracted some controversy. A representative for Carla said she doesn't want to take offense or feel as if he is attacking her personally. Everyone expresses themselves in their own way, and if anything, people will always feel a flash of Carla's struggle when hearing that line. Cindy Coxey, the mother of Johnny Coxey, also sued Kohlhepp and was awarded $2.7 million in damages. Kohlhepp is currently 51 years old and is still incarcerated at Spartanburg County Detention Center in South Carolina. He will never be a free man again. In 2020, some of his belongings went to auction, and the proceeds of this were donated to the families of his victims. Bizarrely, his mother, Regina, stated, "We are victims too. Todd is not a monster. He's not even close to it. He wasn't doing it for enjoyment. He was doing it because he was mad and he was hurt." Despite Regina's claims, it seems quite clear that regardless of his reasoning, Kohlhepp is indeed a monster. He is responsible for the deaths of 7 people and the sexual assault of 2 more. Not exactly the work of an innocent man. So far, he has not been tied to further homicides, but that could change in the future. Law enforcement hasn't ruled out that he is responsible for other crimes. It's difficult to say for certain what exactly triggered Kohlhepp, especially since he was supposedly a troublesome child, even when he was as young as 15 months, since he appeared to have issues with the father figures in his life. There has been some speculation that he was searching for approval or something similar from other men. Kohlhepp himself blames his mother for his upbringing, and their relationship is strained even today, often blowing hot and cold. For many experts and even former friends and acquaintances of Kohlhepp, the root of his issues is in his childhood. He was a young boy looking for love and affection, but grew up in a household of abuse and dysfunction. Perhaps his life would have panned out differently had he been given the necessary support to help him change his ways, or perhaps harming others was always in his DNA.